ready to talk hockey. Streaming from the Oilers Live studio. Subscribe or follow today.
Hey everybody, it's Michael here from Oilers Live with another Mega Thread Monday. And so I'm going to pass it off early to Mr. Mike Dursa for Mega Thread Monday. Although I do want to point out, and it's an exciting intro, but I have put underneath our videos today a little Nova Scotia flag, and start quickly. It has been a tough 2020. There's no doubt, and so you know what? That's there. What a tragedy. We won't dwell on it tonight, but honestly, just thought I'd mention that, and I'm proud to have that out there. And I'm wearing my East Coast lifestyle hat today. I've been out that way, been to Enfield and all those places. So quite often. All right. Anyway, Mike, sorry to take your thunder. Mega Thread Monday. Fire away.
So Sunday night, ESPN released a documentary on, I think it's the 1997-98 Chicago Bulls final season together as the team we knew as kind of the team that won 6 NBA championships in a decade. I grew up, in 1986. I watched. My dad was a big Boston Celtics fan because he grew up, about an hour and a half from Boston in Massachusetts. So he was a big Boston Celtics fan. And in 1986, on a little TV, I think probably like 12-inch TV, we got WGN out of Chicago, and I watched Michael Jordan light up my dad's Boston Celtics for 63 points in the playoffs, a record that still holds true today. And since that day, there were 2 athletes really that captivated my attention up until I think around 1999 when a football player by the name of Tom Brady was drafted by the New England Patriots. But really, for most of my youth years, it was Michael Jordan or Wayne Gretzky. I don't know if you've watched the documentary yet. It just was available in Canada kind of at 1:00 in the morning Monday, and you can watch it on Netflix. But it's I think a 10-hour long, and they're releasing 2 hours I think at a time documentary. So every Monday I think they come out with two episodes. But have you seen it yet, or?
I have not seen it yet. I've seen people tweet about it, but you're a huge basketball fan. I've never really got into it. I've had some basketball events, but I had a hard time getting too terribly excited when the Raptors won. Yeah,
no, I think I think the NBA now is probably even harder to get into if you're a hockey guy than it was back then. It's in the late 80s, mid 80s, when Michael kind of first came on the scene to kind of when he walked away, I think in 2000 or 2001 or something, it's changed quite a bit. Like when Michael was in his early years, Boston Celtics were and LA Lakers were kind of still under Magic Johnson and Larry Bird, and they kind of had their, 2 dynasties, and then Detroit Pistons had kind of a 3.5 year run where they were kind of the next team, and then it took Chicago kind of to get past Detroit, and then Chicago really for a decade was the team to kind of deal with. And I see similarities between Chicago Bulls and our Oilers of the 80s, and 2 really high prolific profile athletes in Wayne Gretzky and Michael Jordan. I think, later in Wayne's career, I think it became evident that Wayne couldn't do it all by himself. I don't think, people really saw that early on because he was surrounded by such great players in those early years as with the Oilers. Although it did take a little bit for them to kind of get over the hump too, and Edmonton had to sort of get past the New York Islanders, in the Cup final, but that was kind of their obstacle before they could start winning championships. I see similarities in the two. Um, Ironically, guys like Tiger Woods, Wayne Gretzky, Tom Brady, and Michael Jordan all have something in common. Um, they all were, highly successful athletes in their respective sports, but after a while of having that, elite kind of status and success, there becomes a crowd of people that want to see them lose. And the Oilers, I remember there, and they talk about a little bit on Boys on the Bus, but there was people that wanted to see the Oilers lose, that they would watch Oilers games just to watch them lose, and it was no different with the Chicago Bulls, and everybody knows about how hated the Patriots are. And I think Tom Brady leaving to go to the Tampa Bay and stuff makes a lot of people happy because they see it as the end of the dynasty. Like people want to see those dynasties fall. And I'm a bit of a, I like, stories like the Edmonton Grads where they were great for, decades. To me, that's awesome. Like staying at an elite level for a long, long time is, it's amazing to kind of study that and follow that. And for me as an athlete, I would watch other sports and try to, emulate things that those guys would do to have success and bring it into the sport I was playing. I mean, when I grew up, I was a basketball player early, before I became a hockey player. But being an Alberta kid, you can't stay away from hockey. So I was basically a point guard first, but I would use everything I knew on the basketball court when I started playing hockey. And the two sports, I mean, from a guard perspective, they relate. And I guess if you were a post player in basketball, you could be like a Milan Lucic or Ryan Smith, kind of, on the ice where you stand in front of the net and get all your points or all your goals from 3 feet away from the net. But as a point guard in basketball, I was always looking at things, using my peripheral vision there. So it really helped me kind of on the ice. I mean, that's the one thing I think I do all right is seeing what's out there. I might not actually hit what I'm trying to find, but I see it. I was going to ask you too, do you remember those, maybe because you said you were a Montreal Canadiens fan really before you became a Oiler fan, but do you remember in the 80s, after probably about the third cup, people wanted to see us lose. Do you remember any of that?
Oh, yeah, 100%. I mean, if it's a for us or against us sort of mentality, right? And yeah, there are very few people that just kind of will be all right with team dominating like the Oilers did, right? Like they'll just there's some people who, for the love of sport, they want to see elite teams and elite players do really well. Like true sports fans, true hockey fans. But if you're not a full-time hockey fan, and that doesn't take anything away from you, but if you're not a full-time hockey fan, and just like if you're not a full-time football fan, right? Like you kind of look for the evil the evil villain is
Yeah.
always the team that's doing really well. I do remember, yeah, I
Yeah.
remember lots of people wanted to see the Oilers lose, and it was those were crazy times, right? I mean, the Oilers didn't lose often, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think it's harder to do in the NHL what Chicago did a little bit that one year. They went 72-10. I don't think you'll ever see that really in the NHL. I don't think. Maybe I shouldn't say that. Tampa Bay had a pretty good record last year, but I guess Tampa Bay, you could compare them to the Golden State Warriors a few years ago that went. I think their record was 73-9. They had the best record in NBA history. But unlike Chicago, they didn't win in the finals. They lost to LeBron James's Cavaliers. So Tampa Bay, they got they got swept in the first round by Columbus after having a great year. I mean, so sometimes, your regular season doesn't really mean much when the postseason starts. It's a whole new season, and it doesn't seem to matter what sport you're in.
Yeah, Tampa Bay does too well.
I was gonna say too, talking about these sort of athletes from years gone by, I look at Bo Jackson as the greatest team sports athlete I've ever seen. Unfortunately, his career was cut short, but it leads me to my question for you. Do you remember Pro Stars, the cereal and the cartoon?
Yeah, I vaguely remember them. I do. Yeah, I remember the cereal better than I remember the cartoon, but I remember the cartoon.
I remember the cereal is pretty bland, and the cartoon is funny.
Yeah. I don't actually know that I've ever eaten a cereal, but I'd probably love to have a box of that lying around here now. I wonder, you could probably get it for like a couple $100 a good to go box, or you could just print it now, right? Like put it on your wall or something. Yeah,
make one, just buy a Fruit Loops box and
that's right.
Decal it up.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I learned something. I did watch the documentary today before I watched Dustin Nielsen call his simulation game,
which was fantastic, by the way.
Yeah, he does a great job of that.
Oilers won at fake Rogers Place
in overtime.
Game 7. Yeah, Game 7. Tyler Ennis. That was great.
Beat the Flames. Yeah, they got a neat little nickname for him, Ennis the Menace.
Just quickly, for those that don't know, Mr. Nielsen's going to be joining us at 9:30 today, which is pretty exciting. Good guy, and also a hell of a game caller, right?
Yeah, and he might not be too happy with me wearing a Bulls hat and kind of a Jordan insignia hoodie, but.
Is he a ball fan? What does he? Who does he?
Yeah, he's big into LeBron James, and you know what? LeBron James is a great basketball player. There's no denying that. And I won't get into the greatest of all time debate with him because I think that's sort of conjecture, and you're never going to convince me, and I'm never probably going to convince him. So it doesn't really matter.
Yeah, fair enough.
You know what? Watching that documentary, though, I learned some similarities between Connor McDavid and Michael Jordan. Michael Jordan, I think it was in his third season with the Bulls. He basically blew his ankle really bad, and he was injured, and he was out, I think, for a couple of 6 weeks or something like that. I'm not exactly sure on the time frame, but he wanted to come back ahead of schedule, much like Connor, and he worked really hard to make that happen. He went in front of this is a little bit different than Connor, but he went in front of the Bulls team doctors. They advised that he don't do anything yet because he wasn't ready.
Yeah.
He asked the Bulls organization if he could go back to college, and they thought it was to study. And maybe I got this a little bit wrong. Maybe they said no, but he went anyway. So they let him have a leave of absence, I think, for 2 weeks. I think he went down for, and he worked out. He went to the gym, and they let him shoot around. And then pretty soon he's playing 1-on-1 with guys, and then 2-on-2, and then 3-on-3, and then 4-on-4, and then 5-on-5, and full court games. And he's feeling pretty good. And then he comes back to Chicago. And the Bulls are saying, well, doctors are saying, there's a 90% chance that nothing will happen, but there's a 10% chance that it will. And the type of guy he is, he wanted to play. The team needs me. They're not going to make the playoffs if I don't play, and I don't believe in us tanking for a draft pick. So he pushed them into a conversation about, playing. And they finally agreed that he could play, but then they limited his minutes to 7 minutes a quarter. So, basketball games are 12-minute quarters, and Michael Jordan's the type of guy that could play 48 minutes if you let him. But they limited his minutes to 7 minutes a half. And, this is an athlete that's pushing the management to make him play, not sit him out. I mean, I think that's the difference between athletes of, Gretzky and Jordan's era compared to some of the athletes now. I mean, some of them now, if they're wanting to be held back to protect their career for years to come, and they don't really necessarily care so much, or it isn't the first priority for them for their team to do well. Like Jordan was convinced the team wanted the, to tank to get a draft pick, and he's like, no, we got to win. So it's a totally different outlook on sports. And that sort of hunger and desire and stuff, I think, is kind of, there's only a few athletes, I think, that have really, done their respective sports that have been at that kind of mindset. And I think Wayne is one. I think Mark Messier is another one. Tiger Woods, Michael Jordan, probably Tom Brady, and, Muhammad Ali and Mike Tyson. And I think that's probably the list. I mean, I don't think there's that many that are that kind of mentality. It's just, it's mind blowing watching them. Lots of people have said that or Michael Jordan even said, I think there's going to be people that watch this that aren't going to like me after. And so far, I've followed his career pretty closely. I haven't found anything that's surprised me yet. Everything that's been there is kind of something I've known. And I don't know. I've always taken these other athletes in their respective sports as drive, and you try to emulate that as best you can. I mean, I was never a professional athlete, but when you're younger in kind of high school and first couple of years of colleges, there's still kind of that, well, maybe I can. So you emulate that, and you try to conduct yourself that way. Now that I'm 43 years old, I can't take that kind of attitude towards athletics. It's just, you can't dedicate the amount of time you'd need, and really you can't be that forceful, or nobody's going to want to, play with you. If you're a professional athlete, then, you can dictate, especially, like you've seen Boys on the Bus, you know what Mark and Wayne and all those guys having those kind of meals together, that was kind of the same thing. They were all pushing and grinding and trying to figure out, their mindset and where they're all at. And I mean, I kind of think Mark was more, forceful than Wayne, in terms of kind of just that grit your teeth kind of determination. Wayne, I think, was a little bit more free on the ice, and also kind of with his teammates. And maybe this isn't fair, but I think, in a sense, maybe Wayne wasn't quite as good a captain as Mark, just because Wayne was probably a little bit more skilled and didn't have to exert himself kind of the same way that Mark did. Mark would bark at everybody to bring him up to the same level as him. I think Wayne was more a lead by example kind of guy.
Yeah, I think, there's the difference between good and great. I mean, raw talent takes you somewhere. There's no doubt, right? Like, some players just have the raw talent. But, you talk about Jordan, and you talk about, these guys grinding away, Gretzky, you talk about McDavid. They have talent. And I suppose, I believe 100% that talent is not necessarily enough to get them where they are to be the best of the best. What makes them the best of the best is that mental mindset. And you talk about something like, which I 100% agree with, is trying to mimic them. Now you say you're 43, and
For 2 more days.
Yeah. There you go. So, I mean, you have this thing, right? Like, you say, well, I'm past that age. I mean, we watch, the Game Changers, right? Which is that, documentary about eating vegetarian. And they talk about a cyclist there, a woman cyclist, she was, a couple weeks away from 40 years old, and went to the Olympics, right? And that's mental mindset, right? Like, no, everybody at 40 thinks they're done, right? Like most people, but there are people that at our age or younger, or guys like the Connor McDavids, the folks that have been written off, but their mental mindset is such that they pound through it, they get there, and they make it happen, right? And they do it despite what their limitations are. And then there are those folks that have the mental mindset and they have the natural talent, and those are superstars, right? Those are, hockey related. Connor McDavid, Wayne Gretzky, Mario Lemieux, who came back from cancer to play, Sidney Crosby, who many people thought, was, gone from the game due to concussions, and came back to play and was better than ever, right? And then, I mean, Brady, right? Like, he's 80 now, right? I mean, these guys, it's all about mental mindset. And then, what makes them great though is that they have talent, but they also have the mental mindset to do it. I guarantee you, like, Connor McDavid is coming back, his first game back, he'll be heads and tails better than everybody else, because there's not.
I believe so
Yeah,
too.
yeah, because he's out there. He's with Gary Roberts. He's doing all of these things. He's not taking a break, right?
No, he's
Uh,
using this opportunity to come back
yeah,
bigger, stronger, faster.
yeah, exactly, 100%, right? Like, that's what they live for. Like, they are just different people. If you've ever met somebody, remind me to tell you a story one day about a great athlete that I've met that will knock your socks off. Tonight's not the night to tell this story because it's Mega Thread Monday. I don't want to steal your thunder, but this is
Tangents are allowed here, Michael.
yeah, yeah. But this there is something to be said about that, and that natural talent. Yeah, it'll take you there. Like we've seen, hell, we had Robbie Shrimp, right, in Edmonton.
Yeah.
That damn good talent, right? But I don't think he had the mental mindset or desire that a guy like Connor McDavid has, right? And it's
Yeah.
and you even hear, I don't know if it's true. I've never had anybody back it up for me legit, but you heard that Connor McDavid was like a '90s student, right? Like, that's what I heard anyway. Whether it's true or not, but I don't doubt it, because the guy he doesn't stop, right? Like, his mindset is to be number one, and he nobody's getting in his way, right? Michael Jordan, even more so. Like, I love Connor McDavid, right? Like, as an Oilers fan, we love him, but guys like Michael Jordan are even a step above Bo Jackson, right? Yeah, I mean, yeah,
Yeah, I think it's kind of open ended with Connor though. Like, um, on the basketball court, you can score more points. So I think there's more opportunities. Like, if Connor gets, say, 2 breakaways in a game, that's unheard of. Well, Jordan would get a dozen. So,
yeah,
and he's got more time of possession, with the ball, puck, football, whatever. He's got more time of possession in his hands. So, the one thing that always amazed me about Michael Jordan was every night, every single game I ever watched him play, he would do something, and then you would be like, how did he do that? That was every night. But if you look at it, like, realistically, I mean, he's got more opportunity every night. So if Connor McDavid does something that wows you every 4 or 5 games, it's probably on the same level as Michael Jordan.
well,
And Connor's
and he's pretty
Connor's
much every
probably
night
on
too.
that level.
Yeah, he is pretty much every night. Like, I do get amazed almost game by game on something Connor does. When he has a bad game, like, his bad games are, better than most players' good games, right? Like, he is
And
just, yeah, he's
if
on
you
another
keep it
level.
if you keep it in perspective, Jordan was ridiculously better than everybody in the NBA for a long stretch of time.
Yeah,
Connor right now is quite a bit. Well, I guess it's relative to some
you know what I
people's
mean. It's not an
perception, but
argument
I
you
think
can
he's more
really have, though.
explosive than anybody in the NHL by quite a distance.
Yeah, it's not an argument that really you can have, right? Like we don't know where Connor's going to go, but I do
Right.
think like Michael Jordan, is just one of those greats of the greats, right? Do you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
and we still need to see where Connor ends up. Gretzky, great of the great, right? Like there's great players, and then there's Wayne Gretzky, right? And he
If you
stands
look
on
at
his
it this
own.
way, though, Michael Jordan came into the NBA in 1984.
Yeah.
He didn't win his first championship, I think, until 1991.
Oh,
So it
really?
took
Yeah.
him. It took
7 years.
him, 6, 7 years to win a championship. So Connor's got 2 years to tie him
Yeah.
on that.
I wonder, and
So
we haven't seen enough. We haven't seen enough playoff hockey, obviously, with Connor. But that's when the shadowing really starts, right? Like that's when players start to shadow the great players, right? Like we don't see a ton of that in the regular season. We see some of it, obviously, but when the playoffs start, you start getting the hooking and holding, and you get the Kesslers of this world, and
right.
that are really like all over you, and we saw it with Gretzky every playoff series. I mean, it was actually gross how much the guys were like hanging off of him, right? And Gretzky talked about it in that GQ interview, right, in the side by side with Connor.
Yeah.
I like I that to me is going to be and Connor had that when he was playing in junior. There's no doubt, right? Like he had that, but now we're talking, like love him or hate him, Kessler was great at that, right? Like of being on a guy like that, and I hope you hate him, but I mean he was good at that, and that was his job, and he went out there and did that, and so it remains to be seen. And I think my money would be on Connor doing what Connor does regardless. But I'm still I'm excited to see that one-on-one battle that only happens in playoffs, which we just we never see. By the way, Georgia is opening up end of April 30th. I don't know if you heard the Georgia governor has said they're going to allow people to kind of get up, go to fitness clubs, and all of that. So maybe that's a potential location for NHL hockey. A little bit of Thrashers hockey is back, hey, in
Thrashers
Atlanta.
coming back. Here we go.
Yeah, little Thrashers hockey, or the Boo Atlanta Flames. Yeah, so we.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh man. I mean, yeah. How many times the NHL got to go back there? But you never know.
It's a big
Yeah.
market, but yeah.
Yeah. I heard on Cult of Hockey yesterday. What's the fellow's name that comes on with Bruce and
Kurt Levens.
yeah, Kurt Levens was claiming that he knew some people higher up that said that they're very serious about this remote site, which I think is legit. We have somebody calling in. Let's see who this is and see. Let's see what we got. I'm always close on the mute because I've had over time we've had some things going. Hey, you're on Oilers Live. Who is this?
You like Daddy Dick? Daddy's got a big cock, son. I got 9x6 cut, and I'll love to show it off to boys. Yeah.
Ha! I knew it. So there you go. That's I have no idea who that is, but anyway, he's clearly clearly one of those things we're gonna cut out of the thing. This like the Zoom.
It's okay. His mic was pretty blurry. I don't think most people could have caught what he was saying there.
Yeah. I caught it. I knew right away because with a screener, it doesn't. It's usually some sort of messed up message, but I'm going to have to. It's funny, right? Like this, you get the Zoom people dropping in on the Zoom chats and stuff, and now. Maybe that means that I've made it. I'm up to at least a couple more.
That's what you get
people
for
than-
asking for all those YouTube
That's
subscribers.
right. That was actually quite successful. So now if you go onto
Good.
YouTube, you can go to youtube.com/OilersLive. It's really easy now to get to the stream, and you can go there. But I should say thank you to yourself, Mike, and to Mike Toy and family. Hi, gents. She says on YouTube right now. But you can go. So I put out this tweet yesterday saying please subscribe to the YouTube channel. And it means a lot to me when the Twitter community gets behind something just to help others out. And our guest tonight at 9:30, Dustin Nielsen, he retweeted it as well, which was quite nice.
I saw that.
Yeah, and you know what? To me, that's it's a big deal, right? Like it's just about. There's nothing in it for anybody to do that stuff, right? You know what I mean? Like it's a
Yeah.
good, it's kind of cool. And so you need at least 100 subscribers on YouTube in order to give your channel a name, and there it was. So Marine Toy says you guys are awesome. Keep up the good work on YouTube. Thank you, Marine. We'll do our best. It's Mega Thread Monday, so it's really an easy day for me. I take the day off. I show up. I hit stream. Mike goes on. I try not to fall asleep. No, just kidding. Just kidding. Just kidding. Oh man. All right. So, do you have any other? I mean, it's still you're on. I'm always trying to take over, but I gotta.
That's all right.
Call myself back here.
That's all right. So Bo Jackson's my all-time athlete, any sport, whatever. Who's yours?
All-time athlete, any sport. Well, we've talked about the Guy Lafleur, that I was always a big Guy Lafleur fan. But I'd have to say, and this is going to be a thing, but Mario Lemieux. I'm a huge Mario Lemieux fan. I just loved watching him play. I could watch old Mario Lemieux clips, and I hate to say that on an Oilers Oilers podcast, but
if he played for Calgary, it might be different.
Yeah,
but I don't think there's anything wrong with.
Something I loved, which was amazing, is like the fact that. When we would have him and Gretzky in the Canada Cup, like those were some of my favorite times watching those two play together. I mean, Canada hockey back then was exciting, right? Like those guys, everybody on that team was a Hall of Famer, wasn't it? Like in the Canada Cup.
Pretty much.
You know what? Bob. You know what? Bob, the stats guy, Bob's on. He says, "When are you starting a Pens Live pod?" Well, we'd have. It's funny because if I had to choose another team, the Penguins might be it just based on players alone. Like all of them. Like I've been a big fan of Malkin, Crosby, Yager, except for the final team that ruined them in the NHL. And then, Lemieux, Fleury, when he was there, I was a big fan. Like there were a lot of guys on the Pens that. So anyway, I'm off.
Your boy Paul Coffey.
Yeah, that's right, Paul Coffey. How could I forget? Yeah. Marine says, isn't Super Mario the favorite of SPR and Kelly? I don't know. Maybe he is now that I've come out and said he's my favorite. They probably
rode your coattails.
That's right. So Bob, the stats guy, I'd like you to look up the what year was it that was it the Canada 87? Is that the Canada Cup when 1980? I think it was 87. Yeah, Gretzky Lemieux 87 was that year.
Gretz dropped it back to Mario and used who did he use as a decoy there? Murphy, I think.
Yeah, and I would like to know how many of those players in that roster made it into the Hall of Fame, because that was an outstanding team. I'm looking it up right now, the roster. See if I can find the roster. I'm probably looking up the wrong. No, I'm looking up the wrong one. Damn it! All right. So Bob, the stats guy, we've got to know 1987 Canada Cup team. Who
He's got 12
won?
Hall of Famers.
Is that what it is? You looked
Yeah,
it
that's
up.
what he's
Oh,
saying
he's
there.
all. Wow, 12 Hall of Famers. I thought it would have been higher than that. Howard Chuck, Marine says, was on that team. Yeah.
Here's another question for you while you're pondering away there.
Yeah.
NHL history, who is your most disappointing career player? Neil Yakupov.
Yeah, Yakupov is definitely up there.
Somebody that should have been outstanding, but just never measured up.
Oh, geez. Well, you know what? Yakupov is definitely up there. Oh, man.
Because I got one for you.
You know, there's been a number, right? Like a number of duds out there. I'm trying to think. Probably maybe one of the like Dag was pretty disappointing, right? Alexander Dag. Yeah.
Yeah.
And you know what? He stuck around for a while, but he just never, he never did anything. That was the first person that came to mind. Your thoughts?
Yeah. For me, honestly, the guy that I thought was gonna be, almost in that Mount Rushmore conversation, but never ended up there, Eric Lindros.
Yeah, he did come to mind in one respect, but for him it was less about though like being disappointing as a player and more just disappointing career, right? Like,
Yep.
Yeah, I mean that, and it was just disappointing that we didn't get to see more of him. He was outstanding though.
Yeah, when he did his Canada Cup tour there, as he wasn't even in the NHL yet. I thought this guy was just gonna, revolutionize the game, and it just never panned out to be that. He was an effective player, in his years in Philadelphia, but it just never really, got over that hump, and he never really did, I think, maximize the talent and potential that he had. And then, obviously the injuries, Ellis Scott Stevens kind of caught up to him really quickly. But
yeah, I mean it, and that was the thing. It was, I remember when he was drafted, right? Like they were talking about him in the same vein as the second coming, right? Like of Gretzky, right? Like
yeah.
That he would, yeah, you're right, like revolutionize the NHL. And there is no doubt he was talented in the NHL, just as everybody thought he would be. The downside, and like the thing about Lindros, like I remember, and I was just young when he started, but I remember one of the first plays I saw of him, like basically holding a guy off with one arm, and then one hand controlling the puck. And he could play like that. Like he could play. He was so strong. He could play with one hand, on the stick, and he was unbelievable. Like I rather enjoyed watching him play. But yeah, the injury thing really definitely hurt. And it's hurt a lot of greats. The challenge for him was he just never came back. You got to wonder if his brother would have been any good. I mean. It's the same thing, right? Concussions.
His brother didn't have the offensive flair.
Not the same.
He was kind of, a fourth line tough guy. But, his career, I think, was 2 years, real short.
Yeah. Well, the other guy.
And he was a serviceable player. He probably could have had, 10, 12-year career, but no.
Like the other guy that Oilers fans would know that would had his career cut short by injury or by was Paul Comrie, right? Like he would have
Yeah.
been, there's a lot was expected of him as a hockey player. And he just never. Obviously, the concussions got him too. I think but he looked like he was going to be a hell of a player as well, right? I think he was the better of the Comries. Everybody thought, right? Like he was better than Mike. But it's too bad that he never really came along.
It's kind of I guess circling back to that Bulls documentary. It's kind of interesting to watch the inner workings of both management and players and coaching with these kind of respective dynasties, like the Bulls one, but also kind of boys on the bus. The two dynasties are sort of similar in a way. I mean, I guess the Chicago Bulls never won a championship without Michael Jordan, and the Oilers managed to win one without Wayne. But you kind of get to watch, the Bulls did it in sort of two sections. They had their first kind of three-peat, and then Michael went and played baseball. He came back. He played Orlando, in a playoff series and lost out. And then the next year they went on another, 3 championship run. The Oilers, after every season, it was Glenn Sather's philosophy that you need to change at least 15% of your team every year. So, that usually means 1 or 2 players would come in and come out, every single season for them. The Bulls never really had to see that. I mean, they're for the most part, their first 3 series run, it was the same cast of characters, and then it changed for their next 3. But really, the main pieces of the puzzles were the same for each run. The Oilers, pretty much every time they won a Stanley Cup, it was different, players' names going on the cup. So it's pretty amazing to see, management be able to figure out what kind of pieces you need to do that, and the players being able to do that, and then the sad part is to watch the hiatus of all these great stars, and you start to question, like, what really is the motivation of some of these teams. Is it to win, or is it just to field a team, or is it dollars and cents at the end of the day? And there's a little bit of sadness really comes into it, because I think we all learned when Gretz was traded, there's no real loyalty to anybody. Nobody is bigger than the organization, and you as a fan, you want to get behind the logo on the sweater, but you also want to get behind a player, and you never know when their number can be called, right?
Yeah.
And in Edmonton, I don't think I can remember anybody that's had a career of massive significance that stayed the whole time. I can't think of one. I honestly can't. Can you? Do you have one? I don't think there is.
I'm sure. They're. Jeez. Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. I mean, when Gretzky got traded, it certainly changed everything for hockey fans, right? Like it's one of those like moments in a sport, that has meaning, beyond, right? Like when you can have a guy, not just a good player and not just a great player, but the greatest player be traded from your organization. Yeah. I mean, that was it.
Well,
it literally
that's another
changed
similarity
hockey,
too.
right?
Is that the Bulls never technically traded Michael Jordan, but this whole documentary series is called The Last Dance, because what ended up happening was the general manager of the Chicago Bulls told Phil Jackson that even if you go 82-0 this season, you're not coming back next year.
Yeah.
And Michael Jordan said, "Well, if Phil goes, I go. So it's it's both of us are staying or both of us are gone." And they made the choice to not bring Phil back. So Michael basically retired again and then came back later for Washington, but they didn't technically trade him, but in a sense they let him go.
Yeah. You know what? It's funny because that's like a real coach-player relationship there, right? And so, on another note, like, remember, was it Fedoruk coached Gretzky when he went to LA? Who coached? Who was it that coached? I think it was Fedoruk, right? Am I thinking that right? Bob's probably going to correct me here right away.
Yeah,
Anyway,
I would have to look at that.
um, it's interesting, right? Because people hated Gretzky just because he was Gretzky, because he was the greatest, right?
So good, yeah.
There were hockey fans that loved him. Back to what we
You
were
love to
talking
hate
about
him.
earlier. But then when he went, just like when Crosby came into the league, Barry Melrose, Jeff says, yeah, it was Melrose. I don't know why I had Fedoruk in my head. Maybe similar hair. Anyway, and so Gretzky went to L.A. and I remember sort of the one of the narratives there was that he was a baby and him and the coach didn't get along, and that's why it wasn't going to work. And I just wonder, like, in that case, right, like how much a coach. Coach has bearing on these great players, right? And but people are going to have that discussion about a player like Crosby. When he came into the league, everybody called him a baby, right? Like anytime he got hacked or whatever. And the only person they've been right about is Goudreau. And had to add that in there. Anyway, you got guys like this that are, they're just, they're so good, right? That everybody and then I think about, like the Gretzky, Sather, and the, Jordan, uh,
Phil Jackson.
Phil Jackson. I was going to say Knight, the owner of Nike, and I knew that was wrong. And so big, it's no surprise I don't remember Melrose because I couldn't even remember Phil Jackson, and we were just talking about him. So
okay.
anyway, I mean, those guys, like a lot of those good players too, they've got a coach that they just love and adore, right? Like, that they've been through everything with. It's kind of unique in a sense and kind of neat, and I love it, right? Like I love that sort of thing, right? Like that. That a guy with that level of talent can have a coach, so to speak, right? Like that can be coached. I think it's just remarkable. But there's a whole bunch of different things happening in those statements. I mean, there was the the love and hate of a guy that was just amazing, and then of course that coach player mentality. Hey, we're about 8 minutes away to rip the ref. Did you know that? Are you ready? Have you been practicing your rule book, by the way?
Yeah. No, I'm waiting with bated breath to see what he's going to ask us. And
I am passing to Nielsen every step of that today. In fact, like Nielsen is he's awesome. He's really good, as everybody knows, and super enjoyable on the play-by-play. It was hilarious and a lot of fun. But like that's why you get a guy like that on, because you get to pass him the tough questions.
Yeah, the thing about him is he has kept his show ticking along in in an age right now where we don't really have any sports to talk about. He still makes it entertaining and enjoyable, and kind of brings people a sense of normalcy. So that's good. Yeah.
Did you see his? This was the first time I watched, and his getup was outstanding.
He's in a suit every night.
Oh man, the blue blazer and the.
I'm sort of questioning whether or not it's a virtual suit at this point, because I think he only has two of them, and he keeps just shuffling back and forth. But no, it's pretty impressive that he's taking the little spoof thing seriously, and he must have like I guess it's probably easier if you're watching it on a bigger TV. But the first stream I watched, I was watching it just on my laptop.
Yeah.
So the guys are tiny, and he knows who has the puck all the time. And I was like, how do you call a game like this? Like a real game when the jerseys and the numbers and everything are so small, and know who everybody is. I mean, do you have a sheet that you're looking off? And he's done that. And we're watching the Oilers Flames playoffs, but they've had a couple just the end of the regular season games too that he was calling. So,
have you ever tried to call a game like at home? I mean, maybe I shouldn't admit to this, but I've turned it on mute and tried to call it. And that's not something that I would ever record because it's absolutely garbage. It's shit. Like I could not be like, we've had one of the greats, Jack Michaels, on here, and then and that's not and Dustin was outstanding. Like you're right. Like these guys, they like when they call games, it's like the way NHL players think hockey. Like I can't even. I wouldn't know where to begin. I mean, I know when Connor has the puck,
right.
and that's it.
Yeah.
But there's something. It's a real talent. I don't know if it's a learned talent or what. But.
Well, I think some of it's natural and some of it's learned, and I think a lot of it, honestly, is being really well prepared for a game too. I'm questioning whether or not he's got sheets with everybody's number, and he's studying who's on each team.
Well, I do know the good guys.
I think he knows who's on the Oilers, but some of the Flames guys, a little bit more obscure. He still knows who they are, and it's kind of interesting to watch him do these little virtual games because like you say, if you're watching Hockey Night in Canada, you can say he takes the puck in and rifles it on net, but to get their names right in sequence all the time, it's a special talent.
Yeah. No, you're 100% right. It is a special talent, and I'm excited to have Dustin on. Bob says he called a game in Junior B from the bench when he was an assistant coach. I did senior hockey. I was the announcer one time for a few games. Announcing when the players would come on and announcing the whatever. Like so and so won the raffle, but there is no way. Bob says his play-by-play guy got into a car crash coming to the rink, so he had to step in. That is not something that they would ever ask me to do. That would just be the end of the broadcast, the live broadcast. Hey, so we're coming up close. We got 3 minutes until we got the guys on. I think what we're going to do, if you're all right with it, Mike, today is because I'd like to make sure this is set up properly. Why don't we end the stream right now, say a quick goodbye, and then everybody join us back here in 3 minutes for Rip the Ref with Brett Luchansky and special guest Dustin Nielsen. And then we got Mike Dursa from Mega Thread Mondays and me. I'm just the guy that shows up on Mondays and has a microphone. I got the big microphone though. Size matters, and that's why I get to broadcast the stream.
I don't know. This little guy's decent size, but
yeah, that's right. It's a big ball.
My little R2D2.
That's right. All right, okay, guys. Let's shut her down for now, and we'll be back soon. Bye.